Adriane Gallia, welcome to the WorkPlay podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat about all the visual things.
I'm so excited. We were mentioning off air before we started recording just about how people inside of the WorkPlay method, it's just a perfect fit for what you do because you really focus on the leads and sales. Inside of the WorkPlay method, we really focus on the visuals. And I have just always been of the assumption that pairing those two things together, you kind of have the perfect match because the visual really helps the audience see what the funnel is, go into the funnel, be interested, but then you need that piece of it. And I think sometimes people have what I see either or. So I'm so excited about this conversation that we're about to have. I would love, before we get into everything, for you to just introduce your business, what you do, and how long you've been in business.
I started 2 businesses when I was 12, so I've been doing this almost 30 years. I'll be 40 in about a week and a day, actually.
Oh my gosh, happy birthday.
Thank you. My background is in the performing arts, which will come into the conversation that we're about to have. But for a very long time, I've taught voice, piano, and acting. And that grew from just an itty bitty, tiny bedroom based studio in my grandparents' house into multiple locations, hundreds of students, something that doesn't really exist within the arts. Like it grew so big. Then we added a professional theater company. And then I started hosting a playwriting festival every year, which is like a competition. Then the pandemic happened and I transitioned everything online and started to do business coaching. I'd always been doing Facebook ads for myself and running funnels in the sense of my take on it is if you have a way to have people discover you and then they have a way to pay you, you have a funnel. Whether it's an effective funnel or not is a different story. But I had been naturally creating like very strategic funnels. I would never have called them that. So I started doing agency work and doing done for you funnels and ads and then launches, which came into play with the funnels. Very quickly realized I was going to burn out on done for you work. And through that, I founded Visionaries, which is what I do now. It's still in the early stages, but we're working on events, community, and education for business owners. And the whole mantra behind Visionaries is work smarter, play often, or play always, rest often, and dream bigger. So it's about staying aligned to your values and your integrity, but also leaning into the vision and making it fun.
I love what you're doing and I love your background. For anyone who is like, what is a funnel? What is a launch? How do ads play into all of that? I think we just need like a baseline definition going into this episode because I have a feeling that we're going to go into a lot of different nitty gritty pieces of this. So I think if we can just get a really nice understanding of what these are and how they all create money for our launches, for our business, for our offers, I think that would be really helpful. Maybe if we start with the funnel itself.
Yeah, so try and compress this down into something that's very simple. I think what I said a second ago is the easiest way of understanding it. You have to have some way for people to find you. That's what you would consider more of like your top of funnel, where someone finds you. And then the true sense of top of funnel is when you have a way to directly communicate with them, which can mean a lot of different things. So if you think about what does a funnel look like, it's basically a pyramid, but kind of more upside down. So the top is the wide part. So that's your top of funnel, and then middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. And the more people move down toward the bottom of your funnel, that's where they pay you. So that middle is more of the nurture part. And then the bottom of funnel is where someone actually pays you. Everyone has a funnel. If someone has a way to discover you and pay you, you have a funnel. Whether it's effective or not is a totally different story. When I talk about funnel building, I talk about building conversion engines because I have a framework around how to build different types of conversion engines that are far more effective than just, hey, we have a sales funnel. It's probably a little bit more in the traditional, if you've heard of funnels in the terms of, do you have a funnel or not in your business? That's probably a little bit more along the lines of what I build around conversion engines and the frameworks that I have for those. But when I think about what is a conversion engine, there are 3 main points, and I call it the DNA of a conversion engine. So you've got detonation points, nurture points, and ascension points. Because when a funnel is done very, very well, it's not just they find you, you nurture them, and they pay you. It's they find you, you nurture them, and they pay you, and then it happens again and again and again. Because you want to build more retention into your business and referrals so that people are continuing to funnel back into your business essentially, because that's when your profit margins start to shine. Let's put it that way. There are going to be multiple detonation points. There are going to be multiple ascension points. So that's how I think about funnel building.
That makes a lot of sense. For example, if there's a service provider out there that has, let's say a bookkeeper has their monthly bookkeeping service, what would be an example of this funnel that then also helps keep retention within their offering?
So for a bookkeeper specifically, the initial part of it is, what does your initial sales process look like? Where are your initial visibility mechanisms? Because visibility is how you are driving traffic to convert leads, right? So what are your visibility mechanisms? Something like this. Are you going to guest on podcasts? That's borrowed visibility. Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have a social media account? That's built visibility. So you're building your own channels. Then there's bought visibility, which is where you get into ads, and ads is completely optional. And when I was doing done for you ads, I would not take someone's money unless they already had some type of proven sales system, because you need some type of validation. So it's optional. You might not be there yet, but if something's working well, ads can amplify it. That's bought visibility. This is my own goofy, because I have to put methods behind everything. So it's the 4 B's of visibility. You can bejewel your visibility, or you can bedazzle it, which is my ridiculous way of saying retention and referrals. That's really where you get those 3 initial points. Are you building it? Are you buying it? Or are you borrowing it from someone else? That's what I would answer for anyone: service provider, coach, course creator, membership, whatever that looks like. How are you generating visibility? What is your next detonation point to get them into the next point that you want them to go? So are they filling an application out? Are they booking a call? Are they filling an application out and then booking a call? Is it a 2-step process? What does that look like? What assets do you have built along the way in terms of opt-in pages, landing pages, sales pages, thank you pages, confirmation pages, anywhere where you're thinking about step by step? Those are all of your different assets that you're creating along the way, which is really helpful to have things like what you do at WorkPlay, because to have visual representations of the outcomes that you're providing at each step is integral to funnel building. There's a reason I call it funnel design, because there is definitely a design element to it. So those are all the assets that you're building out. And then the retention piece comes in around how you're going into multiple detonation points so that you are ascending them into either alumni offers or getting them to refer you people or going into some type of longer standing retainer relationship. That's when you start to get into those ascension points where you're nurturing them again and getting them to stay in your internal marketing ecosystem. So your external marketing ecosystem is what you generally think of around your social channels, your YouTube, your email list, the things that you would think of for people who have, whether they've paid you or not. But then your internal marketing ecosystem is where you start to build in that retention process. That is a big, heady concept. Did that make sense?
Yes, it makes a ton of sense. And I love how you piece it together. So we have borrowed visibility, we have built visibility, we have bought visibility, and then we have, you said, your 4 jeweled method.
Bedazzled.
Bedazzled method.
It's the 4 B's. I just had to do something goofy because I wanted it to work with all B's.
I love that. And then we have retention and referrals.
Yeah.
I think this is really helpful just to say categorically, what are we looking at in the funnel? Because I think a lot of people get confused. I know a lot of people coming into WorkPlay are like, okay, all I need is the visual, and then this visual is going to make me money. And I'm always the first in line to say, no, this is a piece of the strategy that helps amplify what you're doing. But this funnel piece is so important. We're very clear on top of funnel, the visibility, where they find us. And I would say for anyone listening, maybe listing out under each of those categories what you already have built so you can really understand where we're headed down the funnel. And then you had mentioned for a bookkeeper, we might have an opt-in page, a sales page that goes into a call with them. How are we amplifying those parts of the funnel? And would you consider that the middle of the funnel, or are we still top of funnel when we're looking at opt-in pages, sales pages?
Depending on who you're talking to, you might get a different answer than what I'm about to give you, but I'm a firm believer that it's very nuanced based on the way that you have already nurtured people. So in general, people are going to be more likely to take whatever the next step is, the more exposure they've had to your marketing already. The more awareness that someone has around what solution they're actually looking for, the better positioned your offer is, whether it's a free offer, paid offer, whatever that offer is. If you're positioning it to meet exactly what they're looking for, there's going to be less friction whether they're new to you or not. The nurture piece comes in, like someone might not instantly want to go into whatever that next step is, and that's where nurture comes into play. So nurture can be optional depending on how tight everything is along the way, but you always want to create those nurture points because you are always going to have people who are not ready to take the next step.
How do we actually get more exposure in our marketing to our ideal client so that it's less friction going in to our funnel? I definitely want to get clear on that because I think that is some of the missing pieces that WorkPlay members are missing. It's like, how do we do that?
I am a firm believer in going where you shine the most. I have something called like, what's your visibility genius? Because I love creating methods for literally everything. So you can be the storyteller, the speaker, the scribe, or the socialite. If you are someone who thrives on relationship building and you're not really into having to do all the things in like traditional marketing sense, I say this works better for people who are more in like service provider fields. So if we're talking about that bookkeeper again, this is perfect, especially for someone in that type of field where like, let's just use networking to do this. How can we explode what you're doing with creating more substantive relationships that are going to be symbiotic? So they're creating more pathways to whatever you're trying to achieve for both of you at the same time. So it's not a one-sided relationship, but you're creating really symbiotic relationships with people who can become referral partners, visibility partners, like whatever that, it's partnerships. It could be doing things like that. Like I like to speak. I would just prefer to get up and talk about something, like put me on stage. You want to put a microphone in my hand? My warning is you have to tell me when to stop. So I love to speak. I love to be on stage. I am not shy about it all day, every day. So my best method of amplifying that visibility and creating those initial detonation points and nurture points, because coming on your podcast, the more your people trust you, it matters less to me whether your show is large or small. If you have the right audience for me and your people trust you, that matters more than a large audience that is not perfectly aligned and the host doesn't have rapport with their people. So there's a give and take on both sides, but like this is an easy way for me to show up. Let me talk all day. I can answer anything. Let me at it. So that's for me. If you're like that, start guesting on other people's podcasts. I have my own podcast. It's a hustle to build. Like it is not, if you build it, they will come. You have to work over and over and over and over again, and do not rely on your guests to help you. That's the biggest thing I had to learn is it doesn't matter how large or small your guests are. You are not naturally going to build your own visibility platform through their audience. So it's really asking yourself the question, where am I going to get the most bang for my buck around how can I find aligned shows like we're doing here that also align with how I love to show up in the world, that's going to meet people who need to see or hear what I'm saying, because then beyond that, it becomes like, okay, then what's the strategy? And that's a very specific conversation. And beyond that, like ads, when you understand that your message resonates, resonance is one of the invisible sales triggers. That's what I talk about. You've got invisible sales triggers. Resonance is one of them. Safety is another. Trust is not like trust. I think we're the original invisible sales triggers. Those don't work anymore. Not as effectively as they used to. People can know you, they can like you, but they will inherently distrust you because the coaching industry, the service industry, people have been burnt. And even if they have not been burnt, they know other people who have. I don't think it's overly saturated. I'm not a big fan of playing into that, but like there's some saturation to it, yes. But these invisible sales triggers, one of them being resonance. If someone is resonating with your offers, with your messaging, with the way you're showing up, with your values, the way you're speaking on things, the more you have that dialed in, the better ads are going to work for you. Meta ads, Instagram ads, Facebook ads are highly sophisticated. As we're recording this, there's a lot of conversation around TikTok. I don't know when this is going to air, but like, is TikTok going away? Is it not going away? And everybody's that I know who's sad about TikTok going away is because the algorithm is so wildly advanced compared to anything else. Meta is like that with ads. There's nothing that compares to Meta ads. It's so highly sophisticated. So when you understand what works and you can put some money, I always preface putting money behind things with like, don't spend money that you're not willing to literally light on fire, because there's always going to be testing first. But when you understand what that looks like and you know that your messaging and positioning and all the things resonate, ads just amplify it. It can make it just go like wildfire. So it's a really long explanation to try and say something that's got a lot of nuance behind it based on your offer, what you do, who you serve, how you prefer to do things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
What I'm hearing from you is resonance is the thing. It's like, how are people putting themselves in the shoes of what you're saying to say, I need this. This is really, really gold. It doesn't really matter what your skill set is, like, or where you like to live in terms of, do you like to show up on social? Do you like to do things through relationships? Resonance is going to reign true no matter what medium you have top of funnel on. Is that correct?
I would put an asterisk on that as you have to make sure it works for your people, because if you are asking moms of little kids, if that's your primary demographic, if you're asking moms with little kids to show up and meet you on video because you like to teach live, is that really going to be effective?
Interesting.
Probably not. So you have to still consider, like, this is not about you. I want it to be about you as much as humanly possible, because I want to find ways to help your business feel more like you and that it works for you. I think it's going to be more sustainable in the long run that way, but it's not about you. It's about your person and who you're trying to serve. You have to take that into account. We're talking about highly strategic stuff. Energy is just as much a component of this as anything else. Like if you hate showing up on social media, is it going to be sustainable long term? But at some point, are people going to feel it? I would argue yes. If you don't like speaking, are people going to feel it? Even if you're not super articulate, even if you're not the most practiced in the way that you want to talk about things, if you love having conversations with people, that's going to show up when you do something like this, when you're getting on a podcast. Strategy, energy, mindset. I would also, going back to your resonance point, I would argue that the thing that links the resonance of your messaging with being able to create connection, which is another one of the sales triggers, is your visual identity. If you're putting so much time into figuring out how to create resonance in your headlines, which is essentially like what's your primary positioning around the lead magnet program that you're running or whatever it is that you're doing, if you have a visual representation of that that doesn't resonate with what the outcome of that is that you're trying to drive home, or the pain point, I don't do pain point marketing in general, if it doesn't resonate and create a natural connection between the words that they're seeing and the visual of what's representing that, you've lost resonance, and that creates a disconnect, and people are going to click that back button real quick.
I love that you're bringing all of this up because it's so important to think about your audience, right? And it's not all about you. It is about, well, where are they showing up? And you do kind of have to show up where they are. You have to meet them where you are. Let's talk about the visuals because I agree. This is what I preach all the time. This is what the podcast is all about. Once you have this funnel, once you know where you're showing up, once you have the messaging down, how do the visuals actually amplify that? I think sometimes people, entrepreneurs, anyone kind of almost overemphasizes or maybe places the wrong value on the visual. Where does the visual come in and where do you place it on these funnels to make sure that that resonance is happening?
Funnel building is a technical skill, but when you are putting all the pieces together, you need to have the technical component, you need to have an emotional component. Like there are multiple skills that you have to develop to be able to get that skill to all work together. You can have every ability to create the landing page, make sure that it links with the thank you page, that the email goes off like it's supposed to, and. But if you lose, particularly when we're speaking on visuals, the emotional component of how to build it, you've lost the plot. Someone might have a solid user experience because they're not wondering, why didn't I get my email and why didn't this happen and am I actually getting what I just paid for and all the things. When that emotional component is missing, they might not ever get far enough along the line to even experience the user experience. I had someone come to me once that was extremely well established and wanted to start running ads. Cool, I'm here for that. It's the easiest for me to say, yes, let's talk about this because I feel very strongly about not taking people's money for something that is not already built. This is a great starting point. Let's look at what you've already got. Now, this was someone who's like mindset manifestation. I tend to attract the spiritual girlies.
I love it. I know there's a few listening right now because so does the WorkPlay method.
we love it. Like, I'm a projector. I'm here to talk about all the woo-woo things. And so even though I'm very, very strategic, I tend to attract the spiritual crowd. And so it was someone who was like very into manifestation and it was very soft feeling. All of their brand identity was built around imagery that was like very editorial feeling. It's beautiful. I'm also a photographer. I've done all the things, but I'm like a headshot photographer. I was doing them for actors. So I learned very quickly, like, what types are you going to get cast for? How do we represent that? I'm so picky when it comes to photography. Like, if it doesn't tell me a story in a single image, it doesn't fly for me. So how do you start to connect these things? They are beautiful images. They tell a story beautifully, but they don't feel soft. It doesn't match. And your warm audience might love it. But if you're going to put money behind it and run ads to it, like, sorry, I'm not using your photos. Do you want this to work properly enough? You have to figure out how to make these dots connect. It's not such a black and white conversation of, no, we will not use those, but does it really make sense? If you are trying to position something, how to have a more easeful life, and you've got someone with stark black and white imagery, with very sharp lines, with a very girl boss pose, how does that show someone that they're going to have a more easeful life when it looks like the initial feeling that comes off the back end of that is like power?
This is something that I just think everyone needs to know. If you're marketing to a cold audience with with ads, this is their first impression of you. And so all they have are these visual cues. So let's say that you've got the messaging down, right? If you look at just human nature and how we communicate, how we internalize things, it's all through visuals. Every single day we interpret, we judge, we base our feelings off of things based off of how they look and what those visual cues are saying to us. It's not about like the glitz and the glam. It's about what is the underlying message of the visual, and are there bridges between the message and the visual? You know this when you're working with our creative directors. They're constantly trying to get that essence of the end result into the visual. But I do think it's a two-way street. You as the business owner have to fully understand that you can trust the process, which I highly recommend. I think on an energetic level, to bring back what you were saying before, it's like you really have to understand that from an energetic level as well, especially if you're the one in the visual, right? Because we could be emoting power while trying to create a visual that's more soft. So it's really important to also understand that if you are in front of the camera as well, like what is the emotion coming through? This makes so much sense. We have the tech piece of the funnel, right? Which a lot of time has to do with the user experience, how they're moving through the funnel, correct? And then we have this emotional piece almost layered on top of it, where the visual comes in and creates this emotional resonance as they move through the funnel. Is there anything else creating the emotional resonance? I'm assuming the messaging as well.
If your messaging is off, everything else starts to fall away. Like the messaging is the heart. It's the heartbeat of the way you communicate. When your messaging is dialed in, it makes your job as the person who's building brand visuals almost like simpler in a way, because you know the assignment, you know what you're trying to create a story around.
Yes.
Messaging has to be locked in. Like there are so many different ways to frame a solution to a problem from a very general sense. You could be a health coach, but are you trying to get someone to like do more cardio or eat keto or do like hormonal based eating? Like there's 1,000 different ways. Even if your solution is keto, let's say, are you framing that around metabolic health for women who are peri or postmenopausal? Like there's so many different ways to frame, and you get more specific and more specific as you go. When you understand that that's what you're messaging around, it starts to connect all of the other dots. Your messaging and positioning are the key component to the entire rest of your marketing and communication strategy.
Makes so much sense. We've got the tech, we've got the emotional piece, which is the positioning, the messaging, and the visuals. Is there another piece of the pie when it comes to a really successful funnel?
You've heard me talk about over and over and over and over again. I've got methods for everything. I've got my own way of speaking on things. I've got my own way of representing things. These are frameworks, creating your own methods for doing something. When we think about how we're selling something, how are we often doing this? We're talking about it. Like what we're doing right now is we can talk through, this is what it is, or we write text on a page that says, this is what we do. This is how we create images around it. How do you start to link those two things together? What I love, and I think works very, very well right now, especially if you have an audience who is more distrusting, is creating visual sales systems through visual frameworks. Not just a framework, but there's a visual representation of what it is. And that has layers in and of itself around it. Because when you think about what creates all of those connections and the resonance and the safety and the trust and all those invisible sales triggers, if you know how to encapsulate that visually, visual communication, research shows, is 60,000 times faster in the way that we process it visually as opposed to just seeing text. When you have that messaging that's dialed in and you've got visuals that go along with it, cool, I understand what you're trying to tell me. But the thing in our very distrusting market now of people who are excellent marketers but don't totally know how to deliver on the promise creates a lack of safety around that. Talk about one of the invisible sales triggers. How do you get safety back? It's through demonstrating that you understand what their problem is and you have a very specific way of solving it in a way that they understand is going to actually get them what they want. That's framework. So if you can build a visual representation of what that is, I think you are way ahead of the curve because someone can process visually what that looks like. So the analogy that I give around this, it goes back to theater because I was developing plays for a long time. If you won my playwriting festival, we put you into development where my theater would do a world premiere of new work of your show because the foundation of good storytelling is show, don't tell, which is why your visuals in your brand are so important because it shows something rather than just tells. Like, I can help you make more money. Like, how do you show, not tell when it comes to what's your process? What are the pillars of the vehicle for transformation that you offer to someone once they actually pay you? Have you seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada? This is the one that I always
That's
use.
my favorite movie ever.
Pull up the chapter menu of The Devil Wears Prada. The first chapters 1 through 3, it's Meryl Streep framed by an elevator opening with her sunglasses. Do you know exactly what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes, I do.
When you create a visual framework, that's what you're doing. If you ever hear someone go, are you going to bedazzle your visibility? Or you're going to think that was Adriane's stupid word. There's recall around your specific ways of doing things. I've got my 4 Bs. If you want to create daily sales of your product, there are 4 pillars to creating that. You need cash content. You need visibility for your money market. You need money market offers. There's very specific components around what does that look like when you can build a framework. So it's not just me sort of shouting information at you. I can show you this is 1, 2, 3, 4, either process-based or pillar-based. And then you can start building around money market offers and cash content together. That's where you get consistent sales. You can create a bridge between those two things, and you can only do that visually. Someone has to see it to be able to understand that. Otherwise, they really have to do a lot of thinking. And in theater, we want to show, not tell, but we don't want people to have to think about what it is. This is not a conversation around are the curtains blue because someone's sad? We don't want people to have to sit and have a whole conversation on why something is this way. They should just get it. They get it when you show them. If you have an amazing money market offer, but you're missing cash conversations or you're missing cash content, you might have an incredible offer. It might have incredible positioning. It might be incredibly well structured where someone is going to want exactly what that is. But if you can't show them why they might not be getting those daily sales that they want, not because it isn't amazing, not because they haven't done their job, but because they don't understand the content piece, then the rest of it can start to work together. So there are layers to how you can start building it out. Your visuals are on point. Your messaging is on point. Now, how do you actually show someone the vehicle through which you will actually provide transformation? It almost goes beyond the cherry on top, but it's the cherry on top right now because people are so distrusting.
100% makes sense. And I even see it just with WorkPlay branding. If you're providing a big service, it is a lot of time, energy, and a lot of information, how that even comes together. If someone coming into WorkPlay branding, let's just take that as an example, if they are confused on how the whole thing is going to work because it's such a unique service, then they're not going to understand or be able to even put themselves in our company's shoes as a client before they get into it. And it's not going to be easy for them, right? The easy button of selling is having the framework because you just rely on it so much. And then people start placing themselves in it. What you're saying, it's I'm great at being a creative director, but I don't have a photographer. You have the planning phase down in the WorkPlay process, but you need the create phase and you need the launch phase. I find it interesting as I talk to our people, and people will refer back to your methodology as well. And it makes it easier to position the sales around that. It's I already know how to launch. I already have an ads manager, but I don't have the visuals. So you know where to hone in on them at. Do you find that as well?
100%. And there are ways to mitigate it because you can find visuals that do what you want, but you want them to be yours.
Right.
If you're just starting out and you need to figure something out, you have to sort of make choices on where you're going to allocate your resources, but you want your own version of being able to have all of those pieces in play.
I totally agree. Adriane, this has been such an informative episode. Literally, I'm taking notes. I'm learning so much. I know that our listeners have also learned so much. Where can everyone find you? Where can they start to implement some of these strategies that you're talking about? How do people get in touch with you?
Visionaries is the name of my business. So I'm Visionaries online on Instagram or Adriane Gallia. I've got 2 different accounts. Since we're on a podcast, the Visionary Files is my podcast, which Lyric will be on. I don't know when these are going to happen in the order of things, but Lyric will be on that as well. I would love to offer a way, if you're intrigued by this idea of what is a visual framework, I usually charge for this. I've got a visual sales system starter kit that will give you, it's got Canva templates and shows you how to start doing some of this. It's visionaries.com. It's not .com, visionaries.co/visual-sales-system.
Perfect.
And if you use WorkPlay 100, you can get it free. So rather than paying for it, you can start to actually implement some of these things. But I would also encourage you, if you have not thought about how to create really intentional visuals, sooner rather than later, start thinking about it.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure to link everything, and so generous by giving all of our WorkPlay community that free offer. I know that they're just going to run wild with it. Thank you so much, Adriane, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I could talk about this stuff all day.
I know. I feel like we could have gone on and on and on. I'm we have to stop, but you're welcome on the podcast anytime.
Thank you. Thank you so much.